So we're mostly regulars. So
Yeah,
I
this is ad
consider
hoc committee of the
myself
whole right now.
irregular.
Irregular?
Wow.
okay.
Metamucil.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to suggest Seratan.
I'm thinking more of the Baker Street irregulars in Sherlock Holmes.
Also good.
I have to admit I've only read one Sherlock Holmes novel.
I've mostly seen adaptations for movies and television.
Well, it's Holmes mostly was short stories, longer short stories, novellas.
Yeah.
There's, I don't know if there is more than one full-length novel.
No, the others would be compilations.
But the novellas are lovely. I'm collecting up the additional links that were on email after the first
Okay. Yeah.
draft went out.
Are there
Yeah.
new ones?
Not much. Jerry can use either what was in email for his reference.
Which is what I'm setting up right now. I'm just making
Yeah,
a new.
you want to use the one that was in the email for your reference because it has links for most things.
Okay.
And the other presenters will have their links. And but I'm collecting up the links into a copy that we can use for the history.
Okay.
Yeah, if I use any links, I'll be forwarding them afterward, and I can post to the chat what I use.
Yes, please.
And as I go along, I'll just have to mark off which links I've been using.
I just saw a note from Dick that he and Jill are going to just watch. They're not going to
This
try
is
to
good.
join the meeting.
Yeah,
Which is
I
exactly
see.
what they should do.
Okay. I'm just setting it up. I'm just increasing the fonts and everything. Oops.
And the other thing I'm planning, depending on what our meeting host decides, is I'm only going to present stuff if called upon to do it and if people say they're interested. Because I've looked up links for a lot of stuff, way more than could be covered.
Right.
Just so we don't end up with any slack here.
That would be criminal.
No, it wouldn't. But so often our slack has to do with technical issues anyway.
Too true.
That's one of the joys of open source. You get to figure it out. we've got quite a few people.
Yeah. Just- Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here.
Is on.
I see.
Okay.
There's a little bit of chatter feedback in the background somewhere.
Okay.
Recommend everybody mute until they need to speak.
That seems to have done the trick.
Yep.
And tip, if you mute and the Jitsi window has focus, you can use the space bar as a push to talk. It works like a microphone. While you're pushing, you can talk, and as soon as you let up, it auto remutes. The M key is a toggle if you prefer that.
Okay. I've got the agenda up here. Essentially, everybody that's on here right now is not a newcomer. I don't see anybody new on here that we don't know. So I think that's it. And so we'll skip the newcomers welcome and the FOSS introductory slide talk. You see. So under FOSS News, FOSS History, does somebody have the working with the old PC file formats? I didn't prepare for that.
I think that was probably Dick.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got the link for it, but I haven't previewed it.
Yeah, neither have I. Basically, Microsoft file formats, I've never been impressed with them. They don't do a lot of buffering. Years ago, I benchmarked Microsoft's files along with Unix files. Unix beat them hands down at the same speed.
Yeah, the first of these links is discussing file formats, and the second is file system format.
Okay.
Yeah, there should be a link.
Yep.
I didn't find the email message with the most up-to-date links yet.
Yeah, neither did I.
There isn't a most up-to-date one.
Yeah.
I'm adding only a few things that were shared afterwards to the first one.
Okay.
Okay, because I did find some links that do relate to both of these, especially NTFS being slow to open and how that happened. I could share what I have on that.
Sounds good.
It might not be exactly the same link. Just a minute. I think I need to get to the other document here. So what I want to do is get so that I'm sharing instead if we want to have me do that. And I can also do an article that has to do with these old file formats and how they're living online.
And I just posted on the chat what the link under that blue link is.
Oh, good. So this is the first one that I want to do. And let's see if it's anything like what oh yeah, Linux tools to convert file formats. Yeah. And this, yeah, that's the first bullet link. Am I going to be able to just share, or does Jerry have to stop sharing first?
You can just share.
Okay.
It does a bit of push down stack.
Okay.
I unshared anyway.
All right. There. Okay. Now are people seeing my share, my screen?
Yes, we are.
Yes.
And what I want to do is get to the article. And are people seeing are people seeing the article now? Linux tools to convert.
Yes.
No.
Yep.
One no.
Correct. John Thompson. I have a blank black screen.
John, it
All right.
should come back. I'm seeing that you have a pretty poor connection.
Try refreshing your connection or refreshing your browser. And meanwhile, let's get into what used to happen about life would be easier if we could live in a Linux-only world and if applications never required data from other sources. But we do need the Windows, MS-DOS occasionally, and old Macintosh systems. It's all too common. You have formats like CSV, and you have character encoding, things that are different from the old formats to the new. And then the article goes on to talk about the new line problem with carriage returns and line feeds, which are all different from different operating systems and different generations of them. And so they go through a hex dump here that says that shows where the line feeds are and how that happens. And then you have to convert from Windows to Linux. I've had an interesting issue with this too, where Windows does not recognize Linux text files because they don't have an extension. That's an old Unix trick, not giving text files an extension. So you always end up having to add .txt if you want to read them in Windows. And then Windows text files have this encoding problem and the line feed problem. So they don't always display properly. Sometimes I end up just having to take them into LibreOffice, which can convert internally.
Can I interrupt here?
Sure.
The extensions, like the .txt,
Yeah.
extensions have been a part of file systems for a long time. And going back to Unix, before there ever was a Windows, and essentially the extension was not ever part of the file system.
Yeah.
In DOS, MS-DOS, it was.
So DOS introduced that?
DOS didn't introduce the dot extension. They put it into the file system itself.
They made it operating system magic for dispatch.
They used to have an 8.3 thing. The file name was actually 8 characters and then the 3.
Right.
In Unix, they did have file extensions, but those were basically
they were merely convention.
They were convention.
Yeah.
And a compiler, for instance, would look for a .c or something like that.
Okay.
But it didn't.
And your object file was a .o.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay,
Header
well,
files were .h.
Yeah,
and
You note
apparently,
it's not necessarily 3 letters.
yeah,
that's correct.
and apparently, wasn't it DOS that introduced the convention of using 3 letters? And then,
Yeah, DOS,
I think it may go back to CPM.
ah,
it could, but DOS was actually 8.3. And I
Okay.
don't know.
CPM may have gotten it from Ristus. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
it could have.
Now, one thing I want to add to this is with the old file formats, there's an interesting project that's going on. And are you seeing the quest for a universal translator? Is that document showing now?
Yes.
For me,
Okay, good, good. There's an interesting project going on the internet that says in a quest for a universal translator for these old obsolete computer files. And to preserve the bygone software and the files and more, researchers are working to emulate decades old technology in the cloud. This is a relatively old article, but the project, I believe, is still ongoing. And so there is in this article, I think they have a reference to where they've got it. I'm going to scroll down a little bit more just to find out if they in fact do, because I didn't get a chance to look over this. Yeah, this is an archive from some people in Canada, and the Canadian Centre for Architecture is one of the places where this showed up. And let's see. Yeah, the article goes on to talk about digital archives, and there's also the Software Preservation Network that's mentioned, which is a consortium that is trying to help preserve these sorts of things. And they talk about migrating and about emulators and how that's kind of clunky. And so they're dealing with things like Netscape Navigator and older versions of Adobe Reader, which used to use different file formats and things of that sort. So they're trying to create a kind of a digital Rosetta Stone to translate or at least emulate some of these. And they do have some examples of what the problems are. And so far, they've copied thousands of CD-ROMs, some games, diagrams, drawings from a Dutch shipbuilder, a bunch of scientific reporting. Old data sets are contained in some of these formats. It's not all clear sailing because there are legal issues, there are copyright issues, just like Google ran into when they started digitizing stuff. And they talk about the EULA. And of course, the EULAs were very restrictive for some pieces of software. And that didn't have a whole lot of foresight that maybe somebody would someday need to translate it into a newer format. I mean, this is what happens with data when you store it. It's not usually that the data goes bad. It's that nothing knows how to read it anymore, or it doesn't know how to interpret it. And that's how a lot of old material gets lost. And so that's basically what this article is talking about. And I can post a chat later about which article that is. And what I want to do is pull up my document and mark that one as something that we did. Then you have the problem of converting the old file formats. And I'm going to open that hyperlink to show how to convert old or uncommon file types. And so there are ways of doing that. And they list things like compatibility mode, do-it-yourself conversion, things about WordPerfect files, OpenOffice, which does a very good job on older file types, and online file converters. I don't know that you want to upload just anything, and there are limits to the size of a file you can do that way. So this is something I'm not going to post. It's just I wanted to let remind people that there are various ways of converting the old or uncommon file types. It won't be available for everything. And finally, pretty much along the same lines as this same category, let me just mark down that this is done, but don't post.
I grabbed that Earl anyway.
What? Oh, you want?
I grabbed it anyway. I've already got it.
Oh, it's good. You can grab whatever you want.
If you can paste them into the chat, that's somewhat easier. But
I
when it's on the screen, I can copy.
Well, how do we want to handle this? Do you want to copy all these URLs? Because Dick only likes to use one for each topic. So that's why I want to post to chat the ones we want to use.
Dick may need to get more flexible.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Why don't you grab the URLs as I use them, and I will post the ones that I feel are the top headliners. That way we can do either way.
Yeah, if you paste them in the chat as you open them, that would be good. But
okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put into our let me see if I can get back to the meeting window. I will be able to do that. Just a second here. Something is in my way. Let me. Yeah, this isn't doing what I want. Oh, here we go. All right. Now I'm back to the window. And now what I'm going to do is paste. This is my first leading one about opening the old files. That's in addition to the link that has been provided. And you can grab whatever ones you want to whenever you like. The next thing that I want to do, getting back to meeting topics, there's a couple of them that have to do with the slow opening of NTFS file format. I'm just going to put this up, and if you want to copy it, you take it down. You may. This URL. This is just a little discussion thread, and it says NTFS on Windows was indeed always significantly slower when doing a lot of file operations. It was noticeable even long before the Windows, the WSL, Windows subsystem for Linux, existed. NTFS and the whole infrastructure connected to it has, by design, bigger maintenance cost for every opening of the file, for example. And that's undeniable. Then the discussion thread goes on and says, actually, it's the operating system that is slower to open it. And this is what leads into something that I dug up, which is the next one. Okay, here. How bad is the performance for accessing NTFS SSD disk from Linux? And this talks about how Linux will always be slower because of something called NTFS 3G, which runs in user space instead of the kernel. And so it's inherently slower than a low-level kernel driver. And that is a link I'll eventually post when I'm done with this one last thing. And then I'll ask what people might want to cover beyond this. This one. This article discusses the reason why the NTFS-G isn't in the Linux kernel. Only Microsoft can give NTFS to the open source community. And that is the problem. NTFS is proprietary. It is not open source. And there is no truly open source version of it. And so this opinion piece says that it would be really great if you could build NTFS drivers into the kernels. And there's a fellow, Tuxera was I believe the kernel driver that was developed. And it was developed by somebody at Paragon Software. And it's just a one-person project, apparently. Konstantin Komarov. He's a Russian, and there's a problem. In 2022, he stopped responding to messages after the invasion of Ukraine. He hasn't touched any of the code. His emails go unanswered, and nobody's saying why. And this is the problem when you have these open source projects that depend on just one person. Now we don't have any further updates, and so NTFS is not likely to be in the Linux kernel because this project just isn't going to be available, or it may not be available. And we've seen that happen with a few other projects that went on with Linux. One more thing here. Linked in that article, I'm going to list this as one that I do want to put into the chat. And this one I'm not going to post because it's just pointing up something that pretty much everybody knows, and that is let's open this hyperlink. This is about a turnabout that Microsoft has done. Over the years, Microsoft has been very hostile toward Linux. And up until about the 20-teens, Microsoft was threatening to sue Linux over a bunch of things. And one of the results of all this pressure from Microsoft was that was the way the file systems were set up. And there were some other things about the desktop that were set up the way they were in Linux because of this history of contention between Microsoft and the Linux community. And what this article is saying is now Microsoft has done a complete turnabout, and they now declare they love Linux, and they really want to embrace Linux, and we all know what that could lead to with Microsoft. So there's one other thing about it. If you put an NTFS driver into the Linux kernel, there can be a problem. And this article demonstrates what the problem is. You don't want to install Linux into an NTFS file system. This is mainly because Linux has a strict permissions policy for its OS from the user's directory onto the kernel. These permissions are not supported by the NTFS file system. And there is a link there to an interesting comparison of the file systems. So even if you had the ability to freely use NTFS in Linux, you might not want to. You probably wouldn't want to because of the differences in the permission sets that are available. So what I want to do now is take a couple of these that I have that I want to post, and I'll start posting to the chat. And I am done with this history section. And if someone else does want to take over sharing, they are free to do so at this point if there's something else we want to cover.
Jerry, if you're going to dive into some of the new software that has links in the document you've got, you might want to do a few of those before you throw to me, even though I'm next on the agenda. That way you won't be running for the entire rest of the meeting after two of us.
Okay. No, I mean, I'm here for the duration. I don't have anything.
I'm just suggesting that if you're going to do some of the blue links here,
No, I'm not.
You do. Who's going to do them?
Okay. See what I have.
Glorious leader Dick usually does some of them, and if you're going to do some of them, you might want to do a few, then hand off to somebody instead of having me follow Bob directly, which is the way it's. Actually, the version you've got doesn't show where I am, so.
Yep.
On
the
website, he put me in first. So you let me know when you want me to go, but you go ahead.
I just cut and paste from the mail because I was expecting a better copy of it. But I just as soon have you go since you're pretty much ready.
Okay. Can do.
Okay, and let me.
Yeah, and then later on, if we want to, we can come back to some of the other topics.
Sure.
It looks like, Bob, you're still doing a share.
I will unshare. There you go.
But I think at the same time, the sharing has changed in Jitsi. What I'm seeing on my screen is that a separate window open, a separate little spot opens in the screen.
John Thompson, I think you have two sound sources that are feeding back.
Yeah,
You'll have to mute one of
trying
your
another. My screen is still black. I'm trying another computer to get the picture.
Okay, while you do that, could you please mute the sound on it?
Okay.
System sound. Thank you.
Let me try again. What I think I'm seeing on my Jitsi screen is that you, as Bob Primack's face, continue to appear alongside a share of your screen. I think that may be able to allow multiple people to do shares without having to constantly open and close.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter to me. I think you're probably right, but it doesn't matter to me.
I noticed that when I was sharing.
Yeah,
that came up in a separate window. I think that is an improvement they might have just recently made. Jitsi is completely being modified as we speak. So
really,
every month there's a lot of changes.
And I think I'm sharing, but I'm not seeing indication that I have successfully shared.
I don't see that, but let me refresh.
It says I'm sharing.
And no, there's no share right now.
Yeah.
Well, that is...
Some of the technical problems we see in these meetings.
Yep. And I have saved the chat, so I have the couple of references that I posted.
Great. Thanks,
Um,
Bob.
And if people could continue posting their references to chat, at least I'll have copies of them if no one else does.
And I'm still not. It shows that I have a sharing control, but it didn't create that extra window like it usually does. It's not showing that coming back.
Another change there may have been. When you open up the to share window, you have to click on the item you want to share and then click the share button. Otherwise, the share button is grayed out.
Yeah.
So you may have several screens you could share, and you click.
Yeah. And there's the. Select allow after selecting one, and the little gold thing sticks to the top of my screen showing that something's sharing. But it's not doing anything useful. I'm going to try reconnecting the way I usually do and see if the 400 issue's gone away.
Yeah, okay.
That sounds good.
In the meantime, does anybody want to do anything or add anything? Now, someone is sharing, but that's Jerry.
I just shared just to check it out.
Yeah, so it's working for Jerry. It's working for me. So we've got to get Bill up and running.
Yeah.
I'm back in without my camera, but with Chrome. And that gives me a different sharing dialog.
There you go. Perfect.
So I can share camera with Firefox and screens with Chrome. That's just lovely.
That's very interesting.
Okay. Very weird.
Whatever works. So some folks are interested in genealogy and family heritage. Some people aren't. Anyone that isn't, well, this may be boring. But raised by a pair of amateur genealogists, it's something that I've lived with all my life. The current tendency, that used to be done with mimeograph masters and typewriters. Lately, the tendency is to use public websites where somebody else winds up owning the copyright on your work, and your work could disappear if they lose interest in supporting it. So it has all the usual problems of the cloud, combined with other people changing what you've put in sometimes, which could be a problem. So as a Linux kind of person, I prefer to use open source software where I control the storage and control what I'm sharing to the rest of the world. And I will consume open data, I will create open data, but I will manage it locally. Gramps, which has a retronym, but is just a funny pun, is open source software based on Python that will run anywhere, including NetBSD and Mac. So Windows, Linux, yeah, that's easy. as run anywhere, it's got a fairly clunky GUI because it has to be a GUI that will run anywhere. But it works, and it's got some neat features. I'm initially showing the Wikipedia page. There's also a project blog, and it is available through your Ubuntu repository. I'm not going to go through those in detail because I'm going to go straight to the demo. Since the NBC aired a week ago a infomercial for one of the big websites, Ancestry.com, featuring an actress I've never heard of, discovering that she's my cousin. I mean, she's descended of Stephen Hopkins, the Pilgrim. I figured we'd start with Stephen. This is one of several charting options for visual this product offers. There are other kinds of, I don't know what I just did. Oh, that display. So there are multiple kinds of trees available. This is the tree display that I use mostly because it's flexible for families that have more of a braided structure than a tree structure. And if you get back to the 17th century, there weren't a lot of choices of who to marry. The girls within walking distance for courting were probably your third cousins, if not closer. So this one that lets you see plausible, Miss Ruth here, her connection to Giles is speculative, not well documented. So I've tagged her with an orange fuzzy tag that I decided that was the color I wanted to use for fuzzy, and made it a unknown connection, but that's documenting that, well, maybe. Who the hell else is she going to be descended from if she's a Hopkins in that generation, you know? But we don't know. So these swatches of colors are the tagging function, and these are just my choice of things. Oh, the tag thing is a separate window, so it's not popping up on your screen. Okay. We also have alphabetical lists and hierarchical lists by family name as an option. Families, relationships, everything you need. This is a very structured database, and your counties can be enclosed in provinces and states and contain townships. I added township and cemetery as classes of place because there are states I care about where a township is different from a town. And you don't want to know, trust me. In doing good genealogy, you want to know not only the facts, but why are the facts believed true? So we track sources and citations that link a specific person to or event to the place where the fact was found in a source. And all of this is, yeah, you're not going to see that. I'm going to change windows so that you can see the edit dialog. Where is it? And I'm not getting the option to share the pop-up that you're not seeing. Oh, well. Unfortunately, if I shared my entire screen, it would be letterboxed because my screen is abnormally large. And I don't think you'd want that. Well, we can try that. How badly letterboxed am I?
It's
It looks
not
good.
too bad.
Okay, well, that's good to know. In which case I can go to a much larger view of Stephen's family as I care about it, and I can still overflow the edges. And if I now do edit person on Nicholas, we can see that I've only checked off immigrant for him, but I can check off born in England as well. I have other tags that these are all things I've defined that didn't come with the package. Somebody could be notable, Mayflower descendant, on the Mayflower, killed from Ireland, abducted, clergy. The basic life events are in your events tab. The related records, the family that he forms with Constance Hopkins is listed here with any events under that listing underneath. You can click from there to go directly to the family. On the family, you can go directly to the other spouse or to any of the children. But that gives you the relationship. You have to click Edit Child to edit the child record. Constance Unknown here is suspected of being Constance Snow, but not proven, unfortunately, which is too bad because if she was proved, she would get Mayflowerness from her mother, if indeed that was her mother, and so would the whole family descended of her. But it's not proven and it's suspect. You can list alternative names for people. Nicholas doesn't have one, but a whole bunch of folks do because spelling was wild in the 17th and 18th century. Did I make a change to him? Yeah, I made him English. So now he has a slightly darker than English red tag as well as an immigrant tag being displayed. The display of tags can be turned off. I've turned it on because it's the easiest way to see them without going into the person table list. The crimson splash on the date on this marriage is my way of indicating that these two people are in a consanguineous marriage. They share at least one ancestor. I think that is speculative in the sense of it's only true if Ruth Hopkins really is a Hopkins. And, she could be a Rhode Island Hopkins instead of a Plymouth Hopkins, in theory, even that early. But it doesn't seem likely. So, yeah. Cousins marrying, what do you expect? And it only gets worse when they move back to Cape Cod and there's nobody except cousins to marry. But this is a nice package. it has a good backup regime where it backs up the database each time you open it, so that if the database goes and corrupts itself on a program crash, you can recover to where you were yesterday without doing much work at all, which is sort of necessary if you're going to use SQLite. One thing on my to-do list is to convert a copy of my tree to using Postgres instead of SQLite, in the hopes that that will be both harder to corrupt and easier for me to do queries. Maybe I can go in the back door through Postgres to do some queries with SQL, because I know how to do it, instead of only using the reports feature, which has a very nice selection of things to do with it. But there are things that I could express in SQL that I can't express in their system. In addition to the trees, they also have full circle fan charts, which are nice to show all of the descendants. What this doesn't show you nicely is some of the same people show up in multiple directions. Yeah. But if we go over to James, we can do a two-way fan, which shows half as many generations of James's ancestors and James's descendants, which doesn't quite get you to me, but gets awful close. So bunch of nice features here. The resiliency is good. You can put all sorts of notes attached to things. Keep them in sync.
Live streaming is on.
So that's how I, using that feedback between the text files and the database, is how I can stay flexible, so that if this open source project dead ended, if I didn't want to fork it and maintain it myself, and as a Perlmonger's chairman, it would be distasteful to me. My data is still free there. But it has a good selection of reports, some of which are graphical. Utilities, it will compute the relationship between any two people, and it doesn't stop with just the first relationship. It will list multiple kinships, which is useful for those consanguineous marriages. It can repair some database corruption, not fairly reliably, so keep those automatic daily backups. But so all in all, I think this is a nice program available on Linux or anywhere that's free, Libre, open source. The let's see, this is showing places for the last person I did a places search on, I guess. Not really the most interesting person to see places for, but the connection between its places and being able to do an OpenStreetMap plot is kind of nice. I need to play with it some more so I can get several generations on here at once and see the flow of people across New England. This is, well, that just did. And I think this pin down here is showing where my daughter formalized her engagement. And got a couple of trips to Ithaca for Mom and me being born. Grandmother marrying into the family from Berkshire. Doesn't show her going by way of UMass Amherst. Good stuff. So all in all, I endorse this this application for anybody that it wants to do genealogy, do it seriously, and not get tied into living within the Ancestry.com or WikiTree or Family Search walled gardens as a walled garden trap, which I would recommend against. And in fact, if you're going to pay for a genealogy service, I would suggest AmericanAncestors.org, otherwise known as the New England Historical and Genealogical Society, who are actual publishers and researchers who have content worth paying for, and get most of your ancestry content free through Family Search, since you're not going to get the New England, the NEHGS content through Ancestry. But that's just me. That's what I've got.
Excellent.
Thank you, Bill.
And the timing on the live
Thank you.
streaming dropping was good because my confidential information showed up while the live stream was down.
But okay. That was fine. And yeah, Dennis got back just in time. So, okay. Okay, my mic's on. I didn't. Okay. Dennis, are you back? So Dennis was going to play Nanosar, but he's not back. Computer security, privacy, and freedom. Chrome loader malware. Who's doing that?
Well, I have the meeting, I have the document, and
Yep.
I'll tell you what, I will get my image back up, and come on, camera.
Okay.
It's not cooperating. There you are. Okay, let me go back to what I got on this topic, and it may or may not be exactly what Dick has. But what I'm going to do is share my Chromium browser. And are we seeing a new tab?
Yes, we are.
Good. Then we are now, you say you want to go on to security.
I
And-
was just going through. I was going to call on Dennis, but apparently he's not back yet.
Yeah, we could either do security or we could do security would be okay, because we can do a few things about Chrome Loader, and then there are topics that we haven't covered in the hot internet and hot software. Hot
Yep.
software has an interesting thing about the WEPI format, and that would be a
Okay.
demo. Might do that a little later if we have time. But let me do a little thing on Chrome Loader malware. This is from the Dark Reading website, and there it is. The Chrome Loader malware can hijack browsers, and what this is it's a type of malware that's very difficult to stop and very difficult to detect. And even though it says it uses PowerShell can show up in Linux, but it's not just a Windows issue. This malware can lead to attacks like ransomware, and it can download fileless malware because it operates through the browser, and malicious code memory injections, all of which are very difficult to stop. So what it does is it injects itself into the browser and adds a malicious extension. And it can do this in Linux just the same as it can in Windows or Mac. This kind of threat drastically increases the attack surface, as today's enterprises, they're talking a lot more about businesses than individuals. They rely more on software as a service, so they have apps that operate through the browser. And the browser is the front door to the internet, and therefore the user's first line of defense when they access SaaS applications. So the way you get this is it operates through malicious disk images, ISO files. These ISO files could be somebody wants to get a game for free that they normally wouldn't get. They want to get a crack code for some software, and they might get a TV show or a movie. And these are all things that usually are involved in piracy. So Malwarebytes does have an advisory that gives a little more detail, and Red Canary and all of them. And they detail how this operates. The use of an ISO file to carry a script, which then drops the malicious extension, is not really a new technique, but it remains effective because ISOs are still commonly used in business settings, and they're used for other reasons. Linux is installed via an ISO, so you really have to check your checksums as you download this sort of things like the Linux installer or utilities. And when you infect the browser, you can bypass certain security measures. It's not monitored by most security programs, although you can get browser guards now, and Malwarebytes makes one for Windows. But for Linux, not so much. Actually, I misspoke. The browser guard from Malwarebytes will cover Linux, and it will cover any place where the browser is. It just has different protections in different operating systems. So extensions are not usually scanned by most endpoint protection solutions in business to determine whether they're malicious. So by infecting the browser, the attacker gets around a number of security measures, like traffic encryption, that would otherwise impede the attack. So then they gain access to victim data and could, in some cases, provide an opportunity to perform actions on the compromised person's behalf. In other words, you might be getting some email that is phishing email or some other malicious emails that appear to come from one person, and this would in many cases be a Gmail subscriber, and we've seen an uptick in that kind of thing lately. And this is one way that can happen. It doesn't require that the user's account credentials be compromised. So that's all really, really nasty stuff that can happen. So ransomware is also listed as something that can happen. And the best prevention for it, of course, is don't download ISO files and don't launch them if they're not from trusted sources. And don't run files inside of an ISO without verifying their safety. When browsing the internet, make sure you have security controls in place to help you monitor websites. And again, these are called browser guards, and there are other names for them. So let me just drop down and see if I have another reference I wanted to include about this. Let me see which one of these two is the more interesting. And this is TechRadar's take on it, on the Chrome Loader malware. And they talk a little bit about specific file names, though those can change. At least in Mac OS, you can end up with an installer executable and an installer bash script, which downloads and then decompresses the extension to make it happen. And go away. I'm not going to list this as a primary reference because it just gives a few extra details. This other reference that I found about this is the one that's more interesting, because here the article talks about another way Chrome Loader can come in. It can come in through scanned QR codes. It's malvertising. And Chrome Loader malware is being used to hijack browsers and steal data. If you hold up your phone and scan a QR code, you don't know what you are going to, and you don't know what you're downloading. But you could be downloading something. And Chrome Loader has been found in QR codes, as well as the pirated movies or cracked video games. And so it changes the browser settings to display search results that lure users to download more unwanted software, or visit dating sites or adult games platforms and participate in fake surveys. They're showing you a Google that isn't Google. Your search results get hijacked. And it stands apart from other browser hijacks in its incredible persistence, its infection route, and the volume involving abuse of PowerShell. And then they go through the attack scenario in some detail. And so I am going to reference this article because it does give some interesting additional details about how the infection happens and why you need to be careful of these QR codes. So I'm going to mark this one as done, don't post, and this one as done, and I will post. And
If you look in chat, I posted the link that Dick was planning on using.
Excellent. Then we'll just go with that one, because it probably covers QR codes as well. But just in case it doesn't, I'm going to copy the link about the one that includes the QR codes, and I am going to put that one into our meeting chat right away so I don't forget. That one. Okay. Now, let's see if we can move on to another security topic before we move on to the next person. I'm going to skip the 7 signs that your phone or computer is infected with a virus. It's a Kim Commando item that I found. It may be also elsewhere. And Android antivirus apps, I just want to make mention that most Android antivirus apps actually do absolutely nothing. And all that the article is saying is, as long as you're not sideloading and you're not using F-Droid or anything like that gets into root privileges and rooting your phone, you're really not providing much of an avenue by which any apps can do very much. And the Google Play Store is policed. They have had some failures, but they've been pretty good at self-policing. Compared with Apple, I think Android's been a little less good, but they've both been okay. And so the antivirus apps, mostly all they're doing is collecting your personal data and sending it who knows where.
Well,
I
a side note on that,
Yeah,
one of our other agenda items was 50 plus open source Android apps.
yeah,
And very often, if you want to get a truly open source version of an open source program, you're going to need to get it from F-Droid, which brings you back to maybe you should have an antivirus, but you might want a open source ClamAV variant as opposed to uh, something out of the Play Store that, as you say, is just going to harvest your information.
yeah. You do have a point, and what I'm going to try to see is whether that was before or after this item, because I did have that bookmarked somewhere.
That was
Here it is. I
of
found it.
this.
This is what I found when I followed that link. Is this the link that Dick was giving? Because what I'll do is I'll just take that
Yeah, that's
link.
the one.
Yeah. So yes, there are alternatives. There are open source alternatives to a lot of Android apps. And one reason you might want to ditch Google and these Android apps is that the apps themselves have a tendency to collect a lot of personal data and put it who knows where. And so you might want to remain more private, and you might want to do something that just isn't available from the App Store. And so you do have places like F-Droid and places like that that are available. And there's some really interesting things. You can get KeyPass for Droid. You can get various editors. You can get a dimmer for your phone that will prevent some eye strain, and a PDF viewer that is for free, and a PDF creator. I don't know how you would create a PDF on your phone, but I suppose you could. It's more of a thing I do for other reasons. There's a LibreOffice viewer for the phone, and that's also through F-Droid. And Wi-Fi analyzer that you don't have to pay for. K9 Mail, I've heard of that, and that gets you away from some of the Gmail issues. And it's also an alternative to the Outlook email client. And there's some VPNs, and there's a Firefox version, Lightning browser, which is a good open source browser for Android. And there's all kinds of other things. So these are the reasons why you might be interested in having an AV, especially an open source AV. If you do use these sorts of things. So let me take this and count it as done. And I will take both of these and put them into chat. Let's take this guy from chat. I copy that and put it into chat here. So we have that. And then, since we might want an antivirus, the second article doesn't really tell you about open source antivirus for Android. It just gives their opinion that for most people who aren't going to be using side-loaded apps, most of these Android antivirus apps are useless. So let me just count that as, oops, almost. But it does say some things you can do instead of using the antivirus apps. So there are some useful things. I'm going to type one thing. Is the open? You may want the open source alternatives. And then you might want an open source Android AV app. And then I will post why most of them are useless if you get them from the App Store. So that should satisfy both camps. The other one that I want to cover under the security is just Symbiote. There's an ultra stealthy Linux backdoor that isn't your everywhere everyday malware discovery. Symbiote gives remote access to any account, and normal methods don't detect it. Researchers from Intezer and the BlackBerry Threat Research and Intelligence team said that a previously undetected backdoor combines high levels of access with the ability to scrub any sign of the infection from the file system, system processes, and network traffic. Dubbed Symbiote, it originally targeted financial institutions in Brazil and Latin America. But since November, it has spread into the US, and there's a new uptick in it. And let me just enlarge this. This is all that it is able to do to prevent itself from being detected. Lots of different things, and they all rely upon one primary characteristic. And that is that Symbiote is different from other Linux malware in that it needs to infect other running processes to inflict damage on the infected machines. Instead of being a standalone executable file that is able to run and infect a machine, it is a shared object, SO library, that is loaded into all running processes using LD preload and a number. It parasitically infects the machine by basically undermining other programs, hijacking other programs. Once it has infected all the running processes, it provides the threat actor with rootkit functionality. And rootkits, even in Linux, are really difficult to find and remove. It's difficult to determine you have a rootkit, partly because they rename themselves, they hide themselves. There's all kinds of tricks that rootkits have. And once something's running as root, of course, it can do almost anything it wants to in Linux. There's the ability to harvest credentials, and there's remote access capability to download even more malware or to upload stuff that it takes off of your system. And so the way it happens is that the SO here will load ahead of other SOs on your system. And that's why it is able to do all these other things. It will hijack SO dependencies and lists. It will hijack running processes. And when you list your running processes, you won't see Symbiote. It will hijack your ability to list the TCP sockets. And UDP packet capture is something that it can do, as well as TCP packet capture. And when you list directory content, because it's a rootkit, it won't list. So that's a really nasty kind of malware. And there is a little bit, it isn't in here, but I think Malwarebytes has a small article about being able to detect it. So this is Malwarebytes' take on this. And they talk about the very same things that happen. This very same thing comes from Malwarebytes, although it's originally from the BlackBerry Threat Vector blog. And it gives the hows and whys. And it also tells how they can help protect against symbiote. And they talk about forensic techniques that can use the malware's own behavior against it to reveal its presence. They don't talk about exactly what these techniques are, but I'm pretty sure if you were a business client of theirs, they could provide you with tools. And so I'm going to take both of these references, the one about what symbiote is, and let me mark that as done. And the Malwarebytes one I also did. And let me just take this off of here and copy it and paste it. And then let me take the other one, that one, and copy it and paste that so that that's in chat. Okay, I think the time has come for me to stop sharing so that we can have somebody else do something else if they're ready.
Okay, let's see. Dennis, are you ready?
Dennis is muted like a good person.
Yeah, well, Dennis said earlier that he was going to leave around 3:30, but he said he'd be back around now. If not, let's see. What's the next guy on there? Yeah, we're not going to go into Dick's junk mailbox.
It could be amusing.
Chasm for screenshots. I haven't done that at all. And Photox, really, you're the only other expert on Photox.
And I don't have the new release to demo that feature.
Yeah.
If we're up to WebP, I have run into this and I've dealt with it myself.
Well, why don't we go up to WebP?
Okay, just a second while I completely get my notes up to date. Okay. Let me do one of these, and this is where I may have an interesting time of things. I need to be able to share my screen. Oh, that's not what I want to do. I want to do that. Just a minute. Before I do that, let me do that and that. I will be sharing the desktop, but at that point, I will need to drop down here and let me see whether I have examples. WebP is a Google invention. And I think I may have a little article about what WebP is and how it came about. So before we do that, before we do the demo part of it, we'll do this. WebP, or unofficially pronounced WEPI, is an image format introduced by Google developers around 2017. If you are a web designer or a developer who strives to reduce and optimize your image file size, what WebP is capable of should put a file on your face. WebP goes by the file extension. It adopts both lossy and lossless compression. Lossy compression means if you make a copy, you will get poorer and poorer quality, whereas lossless usually preserves the quality very well from one copy to another. JPEG is an example of a lossy image format. PNG, or portable net graphic, is an example of lossless. So there's lossless transparency and animation as in animated GIFs. Now, this experiment I was not able to do because he's using some paid programs, but I can show just exactly what he's talking about in terms of the relative merits of WebP. First of all, a lot of programs didn't used to be able to handle the WebP format. And as a result of not being able to handle the WebP format, let's do this. It was, no, that's going to be these guys. Okay, that's going to be in documents. Anyway, as soon as I find this, okay, here we go. I did this so that I would have some WebP. I have a WebP image that I have downloaded. And the first thing I want to do is do a thing about the file size. First of all, normally it would open in Google Chrome. But Photox, if you have installed the WebP libraries, you have to install a special library for this. Photox can open a WebP directly. That didn't used to be possible with a lot of programs. And another one that can open a WebP directly is GIMP. And there it is. What I do want to do is I want to show you the amount of detail. So I'm going to blow up this image a lot. This is in Google Chrome. And I'm going to go about 300%. To the point where you might just begin to notice a little aliasing on the edges. And so this is the baseline from which I'm going to operate as I show what can happen. I'm going to first of all open the very same image after it was converted to a PNG. And I am just going to open it with Chrome. And I'm going to do the same little trick. I'm going to go up to 300%. And at this point, on a PNG, there's just a hair more. This is very, very faithful. And it's not really a big difference, although if you look at the other one, this is a little sharper, a little less aliasing. So that's one thing about it. And let me see if I can. I'm going to convert this to a JPEG from the original WebP. And these are all, if they aren't the original WebP image, they are all converted. And all I'm going to do is, let me try this in Photox. I just want to save the file. Just a minute. Save. And what I want to do is a new version. And that hasn't actually converted the format. So within Photox, I'm not entirely sure how that would work out, but it did it. Photox automatically, by default, saves as a JPEG. And that's exactly what I wanted. Now let's take a look at the JPEG. This one is, let's get it in the browser again. JPEGs don't normally open in a web browser, but I'm going to open this one in the web browser. And let's see what the JPEG conversion looks like from Photox. Let's go up to about 300%. And on the JPEG, Here we see just a bit more aliasing and a little more blurring compared with the PNG. And comparing it directly with the original, again, the original is nice and sharp, but the JPEG is even blurrier than the PNG. And the other thing that I want to show about JPEGs compared with WebP, let's look at file size. Can you guys see this pop-up that shows the properties?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, yeah.
It's 59.6 kilobytes, 60, give or take. The PNG conversion is 484 kilobytes. That's a heck of a difference. And it's the same resolution. And the JPEG comes in between at about 79, 80 kilobytes. If I'm going to send something by email, this is going to make a big difference. But most people aren't going to be able to do anything with a WebP if they receive it. So there's something that you have to do, or at least that I do. I can take let's call the JPEG, and I can open it with either Photox or GIMP. I have used GIMP. I haven't used Photox for scaling, so forgive me, Dick, but I'm going to do it this way with GIMP. I am going to take the image and I am going to scale it. And I am going to go into percent. And I'm going to knock it down by about 50% scale. And click in and scale. Immediately the image shrinks in size as displayed. But for email, this is acceptable. And what I'm going to do now is, instead of save, I'm going to export. And I'm going to go, I'm going to take this over to my desktop. And that way there won't be a conflicting file name. And I'm going to keep all the defaults. I could probably increase the quality just a wee bit, but let's just do it as default. And because it isn't lossless, I'm going to discard changes. Because it isn't lossless, you're going to see some loss of detail here. So I'm going to open with Chrome Beta. And now if I go up to 300%, there's considerable aliasing. Much worse than there was in the original or in either of the conversions. And the advantage here is that by scaling it, I take my properties and it's back to 44 kilobytes. Roughly the same size image as a WebP, but you lose some detail. And I'm going to do the same thing with a PNG. To top things off here, let's see. What I want is this and not that. And I'm going to take the PNG and I'm going to open that with GIMP. And I'm going to scale it. Image, scale, and percent. And go down to 50. And click. Scale. Export as. It'll be a PNG. It'll be on my desktop. And let's do that. And here we are going to have a compression level of 9. And that's fairly standard. I'm not going to save the gamma or the layer offset or any of these other interesting things. You can do that, however. And you'll notice it's a smaller image. But the important thing about it is when I go to open that and go up to 300%, compared with compared with these images, there is some loss of detail. There is some aliasing. Compared with the JPEG, there really isn't that much difference in the scaled images in terms of the image quality. But for some images, you do get a slightly better quality with a PNG.
Okay, thank you. Dennis is back.
On the WebP topic, sort of the same comments apply for Apple's HEIC format, that some new iPhones will default to sending to your friends who don't have any way to process them. I think I finally got my sister to switch her phone out of that mode, but you can find a conversion library and be able to convert them if you happen to receive one. Jerry, you
Okay.
about to ask if Dennis was back again?
Yeah, Dennis is back, and it's getting pretty late. And we've lost a few people anyway. Do we want to continue with Dennis, or we want to move Dennis to next month?
I'm sure Dennis can find another game to show us next month.
Yes, I don't think Dennis is going to run out of games. What you think, Dennis?
I can do it now if you'd like.
Okay. You got the floor.
All right. I came up with a different way of demoing this time. So since it's been made clear to me that trying to do video from my or trying to do sharing my screen from my laptop is not really that capable of doing that. I have gone over and pre-recorded me trying out the game, so I can just go over and send that over. Now, once I switch to the video, it will automatically mute everyone. So when the video is over, you need to unmute if you want to talk. All right, this is Nanosaur. It was a commercial game for the Mac, and the company released the source code and the assets. It is under a non-commercial license, so you can't go over and take the game and start selling it, but you can go over and install it and play it. It is available on FlatHub. I grabbed the source code and built it myself for my testing. You play as this dinosaur with a gun and a jetpack. Your goal here is to go over and collect as many dinosaur eggs as you can before the meteor comes and wipes out the dinosaurs. You are supposed to collect as many variety of dinosaurs as you can, not just the same dinosaur eggs over and over again. You have that gun that you could shoot. There are various power-ups that you can find along the way. And you need to look around, find eggs, and avoid getting killed by other dinos. You do have a limited amount of ammunition. you pick up the egg, and you'll notice that they have that listed as temporal compass down at the bottom. That is telling you where you can go to bring the egg to teleport it back into the wherever it is you're bringing it. I assume the future. I haven't played this game very much, so I'm not necessarily very good at it. The egg is automatically sucked up when you get close enough. Now there are other weapons, so now I have this secondary weapon that is a like tracking missile. I don't typically use it against these T-Rexes because I find the T-Rexes to be easier to just shoot with your starting off weapon. But I do use it against the Pteranodons.
Did you guys lose me?
Because being able to
We're
just
seeing
fire
the video
and
just
have
fine.
it automatically track them is convenient with a flying creature. Have a limited health and a limited ammunition. You do have 3 lives to start with. And now I've died. Now, once you die completely, it will show you the cutscene they've created for the end. So you get to see the meteor come and destroy the Earth. Or destroy the dinos anyways. You can enter in your name for your high score list. And so that is a Nanosaur. Alright, this is Nanosaur.
Okay, I would like to ask, at what point was my talk cut off? Because I know Dennis got onto his.
I thought you yielded back.
How long ago was that? About 10 minutes ago?
Yeah, about so.
Yeah, I must have accidentally closed my browser.
Okay.
So the only thing I wanted to say was that I did eventually demo the conversion program, Web I X and Convert for Webby. Now back to whatever we were talking about with Dennis.
Oh, very good.
Well, maybe you should demo that next month.
Yep.
I normally use Image Magic Convert, which,
Yep.
if you've got the libraries loaded, will use the command line tool that comes with the library and just fill in the right arguments for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Did I cut myself off before I was able to show how I was using GIMP
You
to do some things?
you shrunk the PNG down to 50%,
Okay.
and I think it cut off after that.
All right. So the only thing I didn't get to do was the X and view.
Yep.
Okay. We could maybe do that again some other time.
Yeah, we probably can. And we're basically down to the teams. Really, we've lost a few people. So we want to cut it off at now. Al got you muted.
With 6 minutes left, it seems okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
I want to thank Jerry and Bill and everybody that gave
Bill and Bob,
presentations today.
I think you both gave really good presentations. I was really watching most of the time with Bill and Bob. I wasn't sitting back sleeping.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry I wasn't around for all of it, and I guess the live streaming stopped at one point, but
Yep. It did. That's when I asked you if you were back or not.
and it dropped at just the point that my demo accidentally showed information that I'd rather not have on YouTube, so it worked out fine.
Yeah.
That's good.
Dennis, is
Yep.
there a URL for NanoSoar for people that want to play it that you could paste into the chat?
yep.
Then you don't have to send it to Jerry. He doesn't have to assemble it because I'll give him something all assembled.
I believe this is the one I used.
Does that directly run it?
No, that's the source code I downloaded for it. If you want to run it easily, it's available in FlatHub.
I'm collecting just a few things that may have needed to be posted from mine, and then I'll be done.
Okay, I'm going to save the whole chat and I'll send it to the team.
Yeah, but I'm not quite through posting a couple of things.
Okay.
Just to make sure they got in there.
I'll wait till you're done.
Yeah, it won't take me very long, but it will take a little bit of time. And some of these may be redundant. Okay, just a moment. Okay, nothing there. Got that. And didn't do that. Okay, this is the one that all right. This is the one that I did not get to present in a way that people saw. And any part of the video I didn't see will probably be available very shortly for me to review. And I'll know where I got cut off. And this is the other one on the Whippy. Coming in here. And a few more of these that those are some from previous things that I covered. And let's see what else we had. I think the rest of this, we probably, the rest of this was the FOSS history, which I'm pretty sure I did post. So I think the posting is up to date.
Okay.
So what I'll do is I'll review the video and we'll see. I will see at what point I got cut off. And that's all I've got.
Thank you again. I wish you all well. See you next month.
Yep.
wish
See you
everyone
all.
well. I wish everyone well, and let's hope Dick and Jill get better as well.
And hopefully a couple of you might come to our barbecue on Saturday if we have it. We're still debating amongst ourselves whether the weather is going to permit us. It's either going to be too hot or too wet.
Good luck.
That is
Oh.
about the choice this time of year. Sometimes both.
Let's hope for the best.
Okay.
Okay.
See
Bye.
you.